You're very welcome to the Daily Rundown with me, Fiona Fox. Now, tonight on the programme, we'll have a guest interview with Scott Lloyd, and we're going to chat about the big stories of the day that includes banned dogs, topless saints, and the silent press. But to get us started, let me introduce to you tonight's guests. Comedian AJ Hill is here.
Hello.
And completing the team tonight, stand-up comedian Stephen Armstrong joins us too. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
Hello, AJ. You're both stand-up comedians, of course, so we'll be expecting lots of laughs. You've been on here the last time together, haven't you?
Yeah.
I'm having a deja vu. Was that wasn't even that long ago?
No.
We're like kind of a super team going on here, have we? Is it because we just think our combination is amazing? We keep recreating it every week.
That's it. Back despite popular demand.
Despite popular, indeed, yeah.
Well, don't forget you can get involved with the programme at home as well if you want to by tweeting us at the Daily Rundown. Go on, you know you want to. Now let's go into our first news story. Labour has called for Culture Secretary John Whittingdale to withdraw from press regulation decisions after news of his relationship with a sex worker. 4 newspapers knew about the relationship, which ended in 2014, but decided not to publish the story. Shadow Culture Secretary Maria Eagle said it had left him vulnerable to pressure from the press. Mr Whittingdale, who says he had not known the woman was a sex worker, said it had not affected his decisions. At the time of the relationship, Mr Whittingdale was chairman of the Commons Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee. So what do you guys think? Do you think it's wrong the press didn't run these stories? What do you think? This story? Well, I mean, there's more than one story in it because you've given us some information tonight, Stephen. She wasn't just a common or garden sex worker, apparently.
No, apparently apparently the lady was a dominatrix. Wow. That was how she made her living. But obviously, the politician Mr Whittingdale says that he wasn't aware of it, and we have to believe that was a words that he said.
Do we have to believe that?
No, I believe that I was very careful that I believe that he said those words. I can't comment on whether those words have any validity or nothing. But he says this. Personally, it's a story about a single man who had a relationship with somebody who has a job. It's not in the public. It's as much in the public interest, You know, was she aware that he was a Conservative minister? Some people don't want to admit what they do for a job.
Which is worse.
Exactly, yeah. But for me, it is just. I mean, I understand, but he is a single man. He met somebody online. He had a relationship with them. He states that he ended this relationship when he found out that he was told that somebody was going to sell a story, and this is when he states he found out. For me, I mean, there are other elements, and I'm sure AJ will be able to tell us other elements of this gentleman's history, which leads, which would not direct a great light on him. But this particular story, for me, it's just somebody had a relationship with somebody.
As it stands, then you're taking him at face value at the moment.
Well, that's until even if it wasn't.
AJ proves
even if it wasn't, to be honest with you, it was her job. If she was legally earning her pennies, however she was earning her pennies, it's just a relationship between two people as far as I'm concerned.
Right. What do you think, AJ? The opposite, I think.
Well, not quite. I don't think it's an issue that she was a sex worker per se. I think the issue here is that the press knew what he was up to. He's the culture secretary, and he had been out with a dominatrix, a sex worker, which he allegedly did not know about. And he says that he didn't know, but the truth is that here is something that I think we should be very concerned about, because 4 newspapers knew about this. 4 newspapers knew that he had a relationship with a sex worker, and they hadn't reported it. They decided it was not in the public interest. Now, I would counter that. I'd say it is within the public interest, because he's part of Cornerstones, which is a group of Tory ministers and part of the Tory party, which push sort of traditional values. So we're talking marriage, and he's voted against sex liberalisation laws consistently, including the Equality in Marriage Act. So I think that there is some hypocrisy in his actions, whether he was knew this woman was a dominatrix or not. By his own sort of views, he sort of believes in traditional values, which it doesn't sound like he was having a traditional relationship with this woman.
It's a bit rich to turn around and say, well, it's a private matter, really, you know. What was the first response?
I would say that the fact that we don't know what the fact that whatever these two people did for their jobs, we don't know whether that doesn't mean that their relationship was anything more than traditional.
It could have just been cuddles. It could have just been cuddles.
No, but even then, it's just what this lady does for her job does not mean that you cannot have sex workers can have traditional relationships.
It doesn't mean that you can't, of course, but I think it's kind of a fair enough point to make that it wouldn't be a traditional relationship for somebody who had those certain standpoints.
And the press loves salacious gossip and rumours. They post that stuff all the time. And this gentleman in particular, Mr. Whittingdale, he laid into Max Mosley very publicly when he found out that Max Mosley had been involved in the S&M community. He said, well, surely you knew this was going to blow up in the paper. And it seems that when this gentleman's been involved in his own salacious gossip, it's been swept under the rug because they said it's not within the public interest. And his position as culture secretary, where he is dictating sort of policy, and he's actually voted twice in favour of not changing regulations in favour of the press, so that they have been effectively let off with some things, just seems suspicious, doesn't it? Seem a bit weird.
I agree. The hypocrisy, but I think to go back to the public interest, what I would compare it to is. And I would be very careful. There's currently a story about a celebrity who's involved in some things that in Scotland, that this person can be named. In England and Wales, this person can't be named. I'll be honest, before I knew that this person couldn't be named in England, but they could be named in Scotland, I didn't care about this story at all. So as far as I'm concerned, if they hadn't put the story that we couldn't know in the paper, I wouldn't care. So the public interest, as the public, my interest has been raised by them running this story. Sure. So by them running it, so this story with this gentleman who has this, Whittingdale, who has this relationship with the lady who he suggests he found out was a sex worker. I just think, for me, she does it above board. If you are somebody who is, personally speaking, if you're married to a billionaire and all you do is shop all the time, maybe you are unofficially doing exactly what this person is doing, but she's been above board and she's making no bones about it. She makes her money doing this. As far as I'm concerned, nothing wrong with this.
But I think the issue...
Sorry to jump in. I take all those points, but I would say the bigger issue, obviously from, just society's point of view, we are more interested if, someone makes a big hoo-ha over it, like you said, if we're not supposed to talk about it or whatever. The bigger issue is, though, why would the press hold back in these situations, and what's the agenda down the line, would you not think?
Well, this is why...
That's much more worrying, and how often does that go on?
Yeah, this is what I think, because John Cleese has been a hero over this. I think he's been on Twitter, the comedian John Cleese has been on Twitter and said, this is clearly a cover-up. I mean, John Whittingdale has said categorically, I was embarrassed by this situation. Now imagine you've got 4 papers saying, if you don't do what we say and you don't do your ministerial role in our favour, then we are going to release this and we're going to publicly shame you and possibly completely ruin your career. They could have bribed him, there's a possibility they could have bribed him or been even chummier than that and said, look, we'll just sweep this under the rug and it won't be a problem and you'll be grand, there won't be an issue with this at all because you're our chum. And that's way too close and that's way too personal.
I think we're not going to want to think that somebody high up or somebody with that kind of power is in the pocket of the media, are we, or that they're puppet somehow.
Or maybe they just didn't think that it was worth releasing at that time. The idea that we know, the idea that this is all the information that the newspapers have, no newspaper is sitting on any other information. People will let this information out when they think it is at the most valuable. Right. Maybe they just decided that this is the most valuable time. At the time, it wasn't. At the time, it was just a story about somebody who was having a relationship. Now, it's a story about an MP who might have kept this story behind them. Now, the story itself has become more of a story by them not releasing it. If they'd released it at the time, it would have just been an average story.
It's interesting that these papers, they've had the editors of these papers say, it wasn't in the public interest, and that's why we didn't release it. Now, if you take Diane Abbott having a relationship with Jeremy Corbyn, you're right, that wasn't newsworthy until Jeremy Corbyn got to where he was and was announcing his shadow cabinet, and they're like, oh, he's only giving Diane Abbott a job because he's had a sexual relationship with her in the past. You could say, yes, at that point that became newsworthy, but to be fair, you could also say, well, it wasn't newsworthy because it's a relationship they had decades ago that, you know, obviously they've worked together since then and it's not been an issue since then, so why all of a sudden is it an issue at that point? The news didn't say, oh, we didn't feel this was in the public interest. They said, we feel that this is within the public interest, even though to my mind, it's not really relevant, something that's happened 30 years ago.
It's entirely inconsistent, it seems,
exactly.
isn't it?
This is the point. It's an inconsistent way that they've been behaving. And I think that John Keys
Would it worry
right.
you overall, though? I mean, obviously, you know, was it one of you guys who came in and said you're a big House of Cards fan? One of you, and said that since you've watched that,
I've not seen.
Oh, it was neither.
I've seen the British one, but yeah, not the American one.
Somebody's been on and said that actually, since they've watched that programme, they just don't trust anything that comes out because they feel that every single thing that's reported, that comes from whether it's politics, celebrity, it's all managed. It's all the person at the centre of the stories is fully aware, even if it's a bad, what we would, you know, perceive as a bad story, bad publicity.
Yeah.
And they actually know all of this, and for some reason it's serving a purpose or an agenda.
We'll take it this concept. John Whittingdale potentially has the ability to curb the powers and curb the influence and the size, the market share, if you will, of the BBC. And it's been suggested that maybe he's good chums with Rupert Murdoch. Now, if he is good chums with Rupert Murdoch, he's going to be influenced by Rupert Murdoch, and vice versa. Rupert Murdoch is going to be influenced by what he actually does for John Whittingdale. Don't worry about a dominatrix, pal. It's not an issue. It's under the rug.
Yeah? So it just overall, it kind of there are a few questions that kind of need to be answered.
It's just
I mean, I know you're like.
I think
but like overall, it's there's questions there.
Yes, there's definitely questions that need to be answered. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that, guys. We're going to go for our first break of the evening. Don't go anywhere. We've got lots more news and a fabulous musical guest coming up soon. Don't go away.